Hello, Debt Warriors, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie O'Shea. December is here, which means the new year is right around the corner. A perfect time to start thinking about New Year's resolutions, especially financial ones. Many of us set financial goals with the best intentions, but following through can be challenging without a clear plan. In today's episode, we'll dive into setting and sticking to your 2025 financial resolutions. I'll be joined by Grant Galagher, who leads financial well-being and brand communications at Affinity Federal Credit Union and co-hosts their podcast, Wellbeing and Your Wallet. You can find the link in the episode of the description of this podcast. Together, Grant and I will discuss popular financial resolutions, how budgeting supports these goals, the power of accountability, and so much more. Now let's jump into my conversation with Grant. Hi, Grant. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Katie. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you again this year. We're going to talk about setting and sticking to financial resolutions for 2025 because it's December and the new year is already approaching. I can't believe it.
I cannot either.
I know. So why is the start of the new year such a popular time to set financial resolutions?
Well, many people look at the new year as a chance to restart and reset, right? So naturally it means setting resolutions. People, they think about it as a new beginning, and a lot of people, they aren't satisfied with their financial status. They look at this as, an area of improvement, and financial resolutions are really that kind of natural opportunity for them to give their financial well-being a boost. Most people in general would benefit from setting financial goals or even, resetting their financial goals that fell off. A lot of people, they don't make it the whole year. They get distracted. But it's really just a good practice to encourage, I would encourage your listeners to set resolutions in each area of their well-being, not just financial and not just stick to one. It's very easy to do one, but realistically, you want to improve everything, right?
Yeah, resolutions are meant for things to improve yourself and make your life more positive. So definitely good to set ones in addition to financial resolutions. So what are some of the most common financial resolutions we see people set?
Yeah, so you have the classic ones, the saving more, spending less, reducing debt, but those can all tie into broader goals. Saving more or saving for retirement, buying a home. Most people would benefit from obviously saving more for retirement, but we see a lot of people looking at their budget in the new year, which is, of course, a great time to look back and reflect on how you did meeting your goals and, what financial habits you want to change, right? When we see people looking back at their budgets, they typically realize they spent too much in a category. Eating out or food delivery apps are a pretty common one. They want to cut back there. They also take New Year's as an opportunity to better align with, ideal spending behaviors, cutting back on expensive splurges that they look back at it and they're like, wow, it just wasn't worth it. It seemed really good, like a good idea at the time. But when they look back at it, it's like, well, maybe I spent a little too much. So that's pretty common when people are trying to look to cut back on what those splurges were and just maybe do a little bit less.
Yeah, and I think pinpointing those specific splurges is really helpful for people too. That's so funny about the delivery apps. Start small almost by cutting that out.
Yeah.
And then that'll help your overall financial goals.
Well, it's like, it's kind of like the death by a thousand cuts. People they're kind of like, oh, I don't want to cook tonight. And they're like, what do I have that's frozen or easily accessible? And they're like, I don't want to do that. Maybe I'll do takeout. And then it's like, I don't want to leave the house. Maybe I'll just I'll DoorDash it. So something that turned from maybe I was going to save a little bit of money and just reheat something that's at home turned into something that's at least a $20 to $30 proposition. Because let's be honest, that's the minimum you're probably going to spend to make it worth it. Right. And that's ignoring if you have like kids or just more than two of you. Like, forget about it.
I know. I know. It's so many. My husband and I have already gotten into the habit of every Sunday we plan our meals for the week, and we're pretty good with sticking
Yep.
to it. So I
Nice.
always recommend it, especially if there's like meat in the fridge. I know it's going to go bad, so
Yeah.
we're pretty good with it. So
Yeah.
definitely saves a good amount of money. So I recommend that.
Yeah.
So how can someone create realistic and achievable financial goals for the new year?
So, I mean, I've preached this many times before, and I continue to do so. It's really, the SMART goal system is really a good way to be real and specific, and make sure that your goals are achievable. For those of you that don't know what SMART goals are, it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And usually it's more used in like the professional kind of setting space, and that's why relevance in there, and it might seem a little weird there, but it still does apply in this situation. And let me tell you why. This can apply to forming short, medium, and long-term goals. And I often recommend that you make them all relevant to each other. They should all connect. So what does that mean? It means your short-term goals feed into your medium-term goals, which then feed into your long-term goals. If you have a long-term goal, guess what? You need to constantly working on it over and over and over again. A long-term goal for me is something that's more than 5 years through the end of time. So, I take retirement for an example. That's not something I can ever just check off my list and say that I've done it. I'm going to keep doing it until I'm in retirement, so I have quite a bit of time before I need to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm looking at that, I need to be more realistic. What's the set amount that I want to put away? Am I doing it? Am I staying on track, or on top of it? When we're looking at something like buying a home, okay, there's a shorter timeline, but you're still going to need to get your credit in good shape. You're going to need to save up for that down payment. Well, you're not just going to, fall into a windfall of money. It's going to be broken down into monthly deposits or per paycheck deposits. So, all of those goals, they should be realistic. They should cascade down. You should understand what they are. You have to break everything down into smaller steps. I mean, you're just setting yourself up for failure if you don't. So they need to be small steps. They need to be realistic, need to be achievable. They need to be repeatable, and you need to just stick with them. And if you miss it once or twice, not a big deal. You got to be able to pick it back up and jump right back into it.
Yeah, I was gonna say those smaller steps. Do you think we should even make those smaller goals? Will that help? Like smaller wins along the way, almost help into your bigger goal?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, making those, and that's the other good thing about making those small steps that feed up into the bigger goals is you feel good as you achieve them. You get some momentum. It gives you, some positive feedback. Because I mean, that's where a lot of people fail is they feel like they're not moving fast enough. They feel like they're not achieving what they want to achieve, and they get frustrated and they give up, even though they had some real progress. It just wasn't to the point where they felt like they actually had achieved something. Well, if you break it down into those smaller bite-sized chunks, you can celebrate those small wins and feel good about it, and give you that drive to not fall off the horse.
So earlier we had talked about having multiple goals. So what's the best way to prioritize financial resolutions when you have these multiple goals?
Yeah. So I mean that's a great question, and you really need to look at the relationship between the two of them. That's really what's going to give you the best guiding approach. For example, paying off debt and saving. It's like those are two kind of different things. You're spending one side, you're putting money in your account in the other. But when you're looking at it, the debt is going to have a related interest cost that's going to be a barrier to saving. So the longer you carry that cost, the longer you're going to pay that interest, the more it's going to make it difficult to accumulate savings over time. Now, this is assuming, you do have some sort of emergency fund already in place because, that's an essential. But, if you are just actively saving towards, something that's a nice goal, a nice want, something you want, you can prioritize paying down that debt so it's not that barrier to savings. Also, time horizon is very important. And I mean, that's kind of like the tail for the financial life though, right? It's like how soon you want it is going to have a massive impact on everything with finances. But, is something that might occur in the short term going to be a barrier to reaching your goals? You need to really address that first. Is the what you're trying to pay down going to be a major barrier? Do you really need to focus on that first? But you also need to think about your financial habits. And as I was just mentioning before, are you likely to stay on track if you don't feel like you're making progress? Do you feel like some sort of short-term success is going to drive you? And then that can be how you prioritize your goals, right? So the shorter term thing is obviously what'll drive you to work towards that medium term one or the bigger one. It really is on a case by case basis, but I think if you take that step back and figure out kind of if one's a barrier to the other and what the time priority piece of it looks like, you can generally figure out what you should prioritize and chip away at first if you realistically can't do both at the same time.
Right. And then, you can always reevaluate to your goals. If you need to focus on one this year, one next year, that's probably fine. Or reset in 6 months.
Of course.
So you should definitely always you can always reevaluate if you need to. So how can someone ensure their financial resolutions are aligned with their long-term financial goals? Like saving for retirement, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I mean, this is, pretty much going in theme with what I mentioned before, but you want to set yourself up for success. The resolutions should pretty clearly fit into the larger picture of what you're trying to achieve. If you can't figure out what that relationship looks like between your resolutions and your broader financial plan, you should probably take a step back and kind of assess whether the resolution is actually meaningful, or maybe it's kind of the opposite, which is bizarre, but stranger things have happened. Maybe your priorities have changed since you put together your goals and your larger plan, and you need to take that step back and you need to reevaluate and say, hey, does my bigger plan still make sense? Because what I figured out for the first half of the year doesn't work with that. So things change, life changes.
Yeah, and your budget will also change throughout the year. Every month it can even change. So what role does budgeting play in keeping financial resolutions on track throughout the year?
Yeah, so I mean, budgeting is the eyes and the ears of your financial life and your
almost
financial
like the
progress.
backbone.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of people, they kind of set their budget every once in a while and check in and feel good about it. But I mean, it really is an active process that you need to pay attention to. It doesn't matter if you're achieving your resolutions, if you have to sacrifice in other areas of your financial being to do so. So, it's really important that you look at that budget and make sure that you're aligning it with those goals, your larger plan. Keep in mind, the budget is simply the plan. It's only as good as the actions that you complete and follow through on. So, if you don't know if you're following your budget and you're just winging it, well, you're not following your budget, and it's really a recipe for disaster. So it is important that you really do keep an eye on it, keep up with it, and, adjust as necessary.
And I was going to say, since it's December, we also have to think about our holiday budgets. Yeah. So if people go over their holiday budgets and already start the New Year's off on a bad their finances off on a bad start.
Oh, yeah.
So I just want everyone to keep that in mind too.
Well, and not to mention, it seems like the holiday stuff in the stores keeps popping up earlier and earlier. I don't even think summer was out before I started to see the stuff in Costco. So it's bad news, folks. You need to start figuring out your holiday budget by July, because you're going to have holiday spending.
I kind of almost like it a little bit that it's now now I'm kind of I want to be done by Thanksgiving nowadays, because that could be better for my finances in the long term, because if I'm not stressed in December about my budget and everything, I like it a little bit, but not too much.
Well, that's the crazy thing too, is as much joy and happiness that the holidays do bring many people, there's a ton of financial stress associated with it. So it's the longer we drag those seasons out, the more stress we're causing people.
Right. And I always say you are probably buying for the same people every year. So it's good to think about you. I mean, it's not a surprise that you have to buy for someone. It shouldn't be. Right. So how can someone stay motivated to stick to their financial resolutions after their initial excitement of the new year fades? Because it can be exciting, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then it's
April. And it's like, okay.
Well, I mean, honestly, even if you make it to April, like that's better than most, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's really where the short-term goals, they shine through. They're really important. They build that momentum, so you're still feeling good 3, 6, 9 months from now. That feeling of accomplishment really does give you a motivating factor. It does help keep you on track. But again, there's nothing wrong with ditching a resolution halfway through the year if things change and it doesn't make sense anymore. You're doing yourself a disservice if you're sticking with it just because you're like, oh, I made this goal, I have to stick with it. Again, life changes, things happen. What matters to you changes. Just look at your budget and look at it at least every 6 months. And if it doesn't make sense anymore, it's okay to ditch it. It just, you need to replace it with what does matter and what aligns with how your priorities have changed.
And I think, tracking your progress, as you mentioned, can also help motivate you. So
100%.
how can someone track their progress without, are there any resources people can use to keep themselves motivated?
Yeah. So, I mean, Katie, I'm lazy. So, the more that I can let technology or something else do it for me, the better. The worst thing that I've heard is like people trying to do their budgets with like envelopes or like notebooks and things like that. I'm like, there sounds like there's a lot of math going on and calculators, and I am just not for it. Budgeting apps that most FIs offer, or even their online banking, they typically offer some sort of goal tracker to keep track of your progress, especially when you're saving up for something. When you're paying down debt, that's a little bit trickier. Not too many trackers are out there for that sort of stuff. But there really is a lot of different tools out there where you can at least track at a high level. Maybe it's like a little thermometer app or something that you're updating. Just make sure you're checking in on it. Every week, every month. But yeah, anything you can do to just automate that process so you're focused on working towards the goal and not the paperwork associated with it is going to help benefit you.
And I'd say with those apps, they have like push notifications, definitely to put those on to help remind you. Come on, we still got a goal. It's so funny that you mentioned the envelope system. That is such an outdated, but it keeps coming up still to this date. And anytime I research like budgeting, it still comes up.
There's some people that just swear by it.
Yeah, some people.
I mean, if it works for you, good for you. But just not for me.
But definitely for younger generations, I think the apps and push notifications and everything will help you stay motivated with your goals. So for someone looking to save more in 2025, what are some simple yet effective saving strategies they can adopt?
So, I mean, going back to just make it as simple and easy as possible, automate it. Most places have some sort of payroll deduction you can do, so you can split up your paycheck, before it goes into whatever account you normally have your money go into. Have that just separate out and go into a separate savings account. If you can't do that, pretty much every financial institution in the world lets you do some sort of automatic transfer on some regular basis. Do that. I'm a big fan of, if you're tempted by the money sitting there, you can lock it up in a CD. That helps stave off, your temptation. But really, if that's something you're concerned about, it's a good approach. And you can do smaller CDs where you kind of ladder them. It works out. But just make sure you're paying attention to when your goal is, so you don't have your money locked up in CDs when that goal does come around.
How can people tackle specific financial challenges like reducing debt or building an emergency fund as part of their resolutions?
Okay. This is a complicated one, and actually, you know what? I just realized, Katie, I didn't answer about saving strategy. Well, I answered saving strategies, but I also wanted to add some of that about cutting back. Because as I mentioned before with the DoorDash and the other takeout apps, you want to look at your apps and subscriptions too. Because we've found that a lot of people, they forget about what they sign up for, and especially if it's like they pay for the whole year up front, it just disappears into the ether, and then the surprise pops up. Oh shoot, I forgot that I was subscribed to that, and then they forget to cancel it again. So if it's something that you're not using, see if you can downgrade it if you don't want to outright cancel. But I mean, look at your history. Look at the last time you used it. If you haven't been in there in a couple of months, like What are you paying for? That they'll happily take your money again if you change your mind, you want to sign up. So
that's so fun. Like a lot of these subscriptions are doing annual pay now, like pay for the whole year and you save a certain amount, which is just, I mean, it would be cheaper if you want the full year, but it's kind of hard to reassess then every month.
That's why they do it.
They're getting you nowadays.
They want to get your money. They want to lock you in, and they want you to forget that you're subscribed, because that's their favorite kind of subscriber, the one that pays them but doesn't use the service.
Yeah, and then when you remember, it's just too late, and then you're in for another year. And yeah, would definitely set a reminder. I just did that for something we just paid a year on, like Sirius XM. Oh, we saw March 1st. We put a reminder on the calendar. Cancel Sirius XM.
Love it.
You got to remember, I'm not paying another year. So yeah. Let's talk about reducing our debt and building an emergency fund if people want to do that for the new year.
All right. So that one. There's no real easy question to this, and it'll probably require some different steps for everyone, especially when we're looking beyond the typical saving, spending, and debt goals. Kind of the best advice for this is to meet with a trusted financial professional that can help you figure out the right steps. A lot of different institutions have different resources. Here at Affinity, we have well-being coaches that can sit down and help our members out. But of course, you folks over at Navicor, you have your counselors that we use quite often, and you're a great resource too.
Right.
Often with setting those goals, it's much more than a yes or no decision, right? You need to figure out how much, how often, how soon, or even how long you're willing to wait if, that the how soon that you want just isn't reasonable. Most people aren't looking to accomplish just one thing either, right? So, let's look at the typical person in their 30s. Probably they're settling down, or they've already settled down. They probably have some student loan debt to pay off, might be saving for a wedding, might be saving for a house, saving for, to start a family. But I mean, that's kind of typical for I'm on the little bit on the older side where I've gotten past a lot of that stuff, but there's still always something else that's going to come up, right? So you want to work towards all of those at once, but really figuring out how to make that all work, how to prioritize, and not be stressed out of your mind because of just how big that all seems. Finding help that can guide you through that is a huge step forward and a great way to reduce that financial stress.
Yeah, I was going to say, so Affinity and Navicor are great resources for this. So I will, of course, put Affinity in the description of this podcast so everyone can get that there. So we were talking about earlier, if you need to readjust your plans and ditch them halfway through the year, that's fine. So how can someone adjust their financial plan if they're faced with unexpected expenses or setbacks during the year? Should they just ditch them, or should they just maybe adjust?
Just throw it all out, start from scratch, right? No, it really depends on how big the setback is and what sort of goals they need to adjust. Hopefully it wasn't such a big expense that it completely wiped out their emergency fund and then some, because that can definitely set you back. It's really hard to come back from that when you're not only fully behind, but you wiped out your emergency fund and have to build that up, because I mean that really should be a major priority for most people. Most people underfund it. They underestimate how much they need. Assuming you have that good emergency fund there, you shouldn't have to necessarily shift your plan too much, but you need to look at the timing of everything if you do have to switch your plan, right? What were you saving for? Was it a high cost, vacation? I mean, what vacation isn't high cost these days, but, if you're trying to go on a summer vacation, you probably don't have too much leeway in shifting that around. You're either going on it or you're not. But if it's something that's more long-term, that down payment for the house, maybe it's retirement, pushing that off for a couple of months to kind of catch up in the more time-sensitive goals, it's not going to have a massive impact. But you really have to make that as a conscious decision and realize that the goal you're now deprioritizing is going to take a little bit longer to achieve. You can't have your cake and eat it too, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. If it takes longer than the year, there's so much stigma where it would have to be done by the end of the year, but it doesn't necessarily. And a year is different for everybody. March to March could be a year, June to so.
Sure.
Just depends on that. What role do accountability partners play in helping people stick to their resolutions? Is it good to have someone there for you?
100%. No, accountability is key. Most people really struggle to hold themselves accountable. So, if you can have somebody that can help you with that, it's a great step forward. It's really going to help make sure that you're working towards your goals because, let's be honest, we all have our weak points. We all know that, there are things that we're not the best in, whether it's the saving, the spending, the tracking, whatever. So holding yourself accountable to reach your short-term goals and your tangible milestones, it might not be enough. Just you forcing yourself. So, what can you do? You can find a friend, you can find a family member, and they can, but of course you want to set some sort of regular check-ins to make sure that you're keeping yourselves accountable, right? Even better, you can offer them the same service. You should, that would be the nice thing to do. Probably a good opportunity to have a conversation with your friend, family, or loved one, whether they also have financial goals that they're working towards, because they might not. And you might be able to be like, hey, guess what? You should be. But, even more so if it is a household, your family, you should probably be having those conversations about goal setting together and having shared goals, because when you share that accountability, you're all working together, you increase your chances to succeed. We all have our kind of lazy moments, right? But it's kind of like having a gym buddy. They're there to motivate you to get your shoes on, to go to the gym on the days where it's just not there. Same thing for your finances. If you know that I have that check-in coming up, I really need to do something, so I have that, you have that social pressure to want to deliver and have something to share and not look like a total slacker. So, that's really the best way is finding somebody who can keep you honest, keep you motivated. And, even better, if they're sharing that financial goal with you, they're going to help make you succeed, help push you to succeed.
Yeah, and I would also add that you want to get somebody who's going to be real with you too. You don't want an accountable who's going to sugarcoat things. You want someone who's actually going to tell you the truth. Sometimes family doesn't necessarily want to tell you the truth either.
That's true.
So you want to make sure it's going to be someone who's actually going to be help hold you accountable.
Yeah.
So think about that when you're looking for an accountability partner. But Grant, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Katie. I appreciate it.
I had a great time talking with you and getting ready to set our financial resolutions for 2025. So happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. With the holiday season here, it's easy to let finances slip to the back burner. But as we head into the new year, consider making your financial well-being a priority. Whatever your financial goal may be, starting the new year with the focus on your finances sets a powerful tone. Remember, reaching financial milestones often takes time, but with consistency, you'll be well on your way. Make sure your financial goals are SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Setting smaller, achievable goals alongside your larger ones can help you celebrate little wins along the way. Prioritizing your finances now will set the foundation for a successful year. And that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, Millennials, Gen Z, and everyone else tuning in. Bye.